This is season 8, episode 12, number 319 of the Decoded podcast. The on-ramp. The on-ramp reminds me of an episode from The Bear, or several episodes where the
Oh
family's
God, not the
involved
Christmas dinner.
and people are
Oh
navigating.
God.
That has become a meme now, that Christmas dinner. I've seen a number of different the same template, which is like you're at Christmas dinner and then somebody brings such and such topic up and then the food fight starts or whatever. And it's hilarious to me, the different topics that people play with. You could do anything, right? You could say anything and then watch the chaos. So as you and I were talking about family, it comes to mind. It comes to mind for sure.
I would love to actually talk like more and more openly about that episode, but I feel like the one or two people that watch our pod, I don't know if we want to do this because there's way too many good spoilers from it, but the ending is perfect. The ending is what you remember the ending of the episode?
I want to say I do, but I'm not 100% sure.
With the car?
Yes. Okay. That's what it is. Yeah.
That's all I need to do, right?
Thanks.
So, the thing that, in my family that where it was kind of like an aha moment is that scene at the end with the car. Is I feel like, so the topic and the sort of like just the ridiculous emotionality and the confusion, the anarchy, the chaos of the episode centered around kind of like a specific kind of energy, which I think was still, I think in some ways the episode was a metaphor for the power, the explosion, the energy around the loss of the older brother. It was almost like foreshadowing, this is what it's like around this family. And it was almost like, if this goes off, the impact on the family will be huge. Like, I thought that's what the whole energy of the episode was. And then the ending of the episode, with the car and the incident with the car, it made me think about how sort of like one event kind of balances and can counter out another event. So you have this whole, I don't know how long the episodes are, let's call it an hour. So you have 59 minutes of this energy, this family dynamic centered around how the family's wrapped around each other, the arguments, the relationships. It's like, I feel like even saying it now, I need to go back and watch the episode again, because even now, having watched all the seasons that have been released, there's parts of that episode that, as I observed it, my own stress level kept me from seeing everything going on, because there were certain things, cues in there, the way certain people related to each other, that I ended up kind of like focusing on. And then a lot of single camera shots, which I think that's what it does. It's a forced perspective. So it keeps you watching a certain thing longer than you would normally. So you become hyper focused. And that's stress inducing, right? Like, you just feel your cortisol going up from the moment people arrive at the house. And also because it's a flashback, where this sits in the canon of the family story. You kind of know, as the viewer, a little bit, I know why we're introducing this element into the series at this point. In the same way, the episode where Carmi meets up with his former chef, and that stare down that they have at that event, and it gets flipped so quick, with Carmi starting with a complaint and that chef telling him, like, you should be kissing my ring. Right? Just that switch, like, so all of these things happening kind of like in flashback and foreshadow. that single camera stuff with that episode was just fascinating to watch. And I think I maybe over the break I'll go and watch it again. But the what I've if I parallel it with my own sort of family relations, specifically how I sort of connect with my mom, that ending to that episode is kind of like how, and no one's done the actual thing like the way that episode ended. That event has never happened in my world, but that level of punctuation on the night has happened so often. So we go through all this sort of like gymnastics of just managing my mom in any specific event. And then there's a thing that happens at the end that, as a standalone event, it keeps on echoing. Like just a thing that happens. And it almost in a lot of ways becomes a distraction to all the other bullshit that happened earlier in the evening. So that episode it's very well crafted. You know, makes me think about the number of social workers or psychologists maybe that they have, kind of contributing to it, saying, okay, here's how you might want to tweak it just to light up other people's trauma, which will make it a lot more real as far as the family dinner goes. Because it was so, I don't think it was accidentally crafted that way. I think someone said, here's a recipe, part of the pun. Here's a recipe for building trauma and family long term. Let's use Christmas dinner as the vehicle, and let's have all this stuff happen. And just when you think you've experienced the full family event, we're going to introduce one more thing at the tail end that makes you go, what the hell? What the hell? And that's pretty much that is what it's like hanging out with my mom. You end up still at the end, you're like, what the hell? The thing that has the tip, it's the gratuity. 25%.
I'm taking it all in.
Mhm.
I'm also considering if our kids end up watching this episode and then thinking about their trauma connected to something we've done along the way.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, what do I say? Hey, Ben and Will, we all get the trauma. Sorry. Hopefully you find a way to work through it. Um, that's all I've got to say to that. But hearing some of the things you were sharing this morning before the cast led me down a trauma road as well. It's like we all have them. They're in our neighborhood. We drive down them sometimes, and what you were talking about this morning in your message to me was set me into a direction. And it's like it's I just had a I've been the good thing about these breaks from work, these 2 weeks off, 4 weeks off, 8 weeks off, whatever, my brain just, I get into a zone where I go deep into thinking about certain things. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. I have a feeling now that some of the things we've been talking about this morning, I'm going to be working through for the rest of this week. But as we talk now, I have to say that I think I'm in a better place today because of those situations. I think I think that's where I'm going to land for now on that one.
Yeah, I've gotten used to just kind of carrying this as part of my philosophical view of the world. I think that's if there's any gift to having to work through the, I guess, issues, the events of my life, is how does this become a philosophical model through which I can kind of like help restore, reflect, um, and not to be so heavy-handed as saying I have to use it in any particular context, but I do hold it um, pretty close at hand as I sort of go through and experience other people in my day, and vicariously experience what they're going through, by if they're being triggered or upset, or um it informs, it constantly informs me. Like there's no sort of depth to that type of wisdom. My sister would say that because of the the environment that we grew up in, and some of the things that we experienced as kids, that is what um we've made useful, the things that were kind of bad experiences. And she, will say that's probably why both of us have become teachers and helpers of other people. She said, she might also say that's also why sometimes, um, despite the toolkit we carry, we don't know how to use them for ourselves all the time, but we are aware of how we want to use them for other people. And that, yeah, I guess that's the duty.
I really like that. I really like that. And the way you landed on the fact that you and your sister do work where you teach others, help others, man, that is it that resonates with me so strongly. It just reminds me of, and I don't want to talk about work, but I do want to say those moments where I see a kid in complete chaos and be like, I was there once and there was nobody. I was there once, but there was nobody like me in that place to grab you and to sit you down and say, just sit here for a minute before you go back into that storm. Have a snack. You can talk to me or not talk to me, but I see the chaos. I see the storm you're in. And whether this is true or not, connecting to them, I feel the anxiety that might be going through them. I feel the confusion, the failure, the shame. I'm sure this is all me looking at them and thinking, if I experience all that in the storm, they're probably experiencing it too. Nobody nobody ever plucked me out and said, "Here, just you're safe here for now before you go back to that." Because I can't stop you going back to that. I can't solve that. Maybe I don't want to either because it's going to build character and integrity. I hope. I hope. But you talking about that, and then me thinking, I ended up in a job where it, the perfect place to see that connection. There are my thoughts on that. I'm not sure what happened to Chris, but I suspect he'll be back in a moment. Before he comes back, I want to talk about this business I mentioned a little bit earlier about having time off work, where I'm able to take my thinking and really zoom it in on certain things and think deeply. I think one of the things I like most about my break um, is the ability to go deep with thoughts and ideas that I normally wouldn't get into without this much time off. And I know Gary and Rochelle, jump in if you want around that idea. Um, I know because you're both teachers, I wonder if in these times, these long breaks that we have, if your mind goes deep on particular topics or ideas because you have the time to do so. Chris just messaged me and said the internet is out at his place. So not sure what that looks like for him, but we'll see if he's able to jump back in. Until then, though, I'll see if there are any comments around the idea of having the time to go deep with your thoughts. I don't know. In a few days, we're going to be entering a new year. And another thing that pops up in my social media feed is this idea that I don't know what all of you think of this, but this idea that with a new year comes a new beginning, and how we manage entering into this new beginning. Chris, welcome back.
Okay, so just say that all over again.
While you were gone,
While I was gone.
I invited Rochelle and Gary because I know that they're here. I invited them to comment if they wish on this
Mm.
idea, this uh, this uh, this idea that with our time off, we go deep with our thinking on one or two things. Um, I just wonder, am I the only one that does that? Are there other people who do that? So I put that out to them, and then while I was waiting to see whether they'd comment or not, I um, I dropped the notion of New Year coming in a couple of days, and this idea, this fresh start idea that is uh, that is floating around on social media right now, and does every year at this time. People start talking about, okay, what are your goals for the year? How are you going to reset? How are you going to this? How are you going to do that? The next level of that is my lack of interest in it. To me, yeah, we're going from 2024 to 25, but it doesn't phase me anymore. This Nothing's going to change for me in a couple of days because I've learned to start doing what I need to do when I need to do it, not wait for this checkpoint in the year. I don't need it. As you know, like how many things have you and I done in the last 5 or 6 months where we started something new, wrapped something up, woke up and decided to change our ways. Imagine if for all those things that we've done, we said, "Oh, I'm just going to wait until January 1st and just sit on it." Like that's not I don't like that. I don't want to do that. So I don't. So 2024 shifting to 2025 for me is no biggie. It's something people celebrate. Um, I enjoy watching how people jump on new things because of this time. I just have no interest. If I want to lose weight, I'll start when I feel I need to start. It's not going to happen on January 1st. If I want to change my career path, I'm not going to wait until January 1st to start planning that and doing whatever I need to do. That's just me. And I'm trying not to throw shade at people that do operate that way because everybody's got to operate their own way. It's got to work for them. But I don't buy it anymore.
I like this idea that I think that this idea of New Year's resolutions is in this realm of thinking, slightly magical thinking about us having radical control over our lives, our bodies, our environments, our other people. And that the idea that we can pivot on a date suggests a real firm belief that singularly because we're flipping the day, that's enough power to make change in your life. And there's more than enough, feel free, everyone, go and do your research. Go and do your research about making change in your life. And you're going to find stuff that talks about make sure that your systems are good and change will happen. And then you'll find other conversations around stop trying to control other people and you'll make more, change in your own life. You'll find other stuff that says celebration or celebratory big event days. Yep, that can give you energy to make change. There's lots of different philosophies to follow as to how you sort of use that 1 second of difference between 2 days, between the 31st and the 1st. I think it's important to remember that's 1 second in whatever number of seconds throughout the whole year. That's a broader story to trying to make change, make yourself better. Like you said, lose some weight, become healthy, all these things that kind of happen. It's a little bit where I find a more useful discussion is never in the sort of flat out I fall in the systems. Let's talk about your systems. I want to talk about systems. I love talking about systems. Um, I love the comment around we never ascend to the level of our highest goal. We fall to the level of our worst system every single time for me. So I know that without a system, I could call it a plan, I could call it a point of view, I could call it a checklist, but I am really addressing the system. Without a system to be able to discuss, I feel like I don't have any conversation to be had. And I can't, as you said, I can't hang my success for 2025 on a singular event because the thing about systems that I've come to accept is that they are so integrated that to say that even to say that this is where I say like, where I really appreciate James Clear's point of view on habit change, that you have become the process of habit change. You want to lose weight, take your running shoes and put them in front of the door every morning. Do that for 6 months until you become tired. It doesn't feel like there's enough of a reward there, that you no longer get any sort of like happy, joy moment off of it. Next thing, put your outfit there. You want to see how many little seconds it takes to make that change? Count the seconds that takes you to walk down to your front door to put your shoes there every day. And at the end of the day, go put them away back on the shelf, then bring them down the next morning. If that takes you 300 seconds, then you know you've taken 5 minutes towards change. Repeat. So the integration of systems, the conflict between systems, the unabashed admittance that your system doesn't work, and then you look for other people that have good systems, being open to failure, and in the moment that you do high accountability by posting up on your Instagram, this year I'm going to lose 50 pounds, it's the year. Allow that openness and accountability to also have a softer side where you're accountable to the fact when your plan goes to shit. What does that mean? What does that mean? So I agree. I like this time of year only because of the suggestion of this radical ownership that people are going to pivot and just make change. The book club, I'll just close on this. The book club, it's where I was trying to nudge people. Let's talk about our systems. We did the three for, and that last, I almost called it episode, but that last meetup, book club for men, where my craving was to talk about going dark and the space between the noticing and any sort of sense of success. What's that struggle? What's that grind? I don't think we got there. I don't think we quite got there. And hey, maybe in time we could have, but if we were sort of doing high intent, like high end, what's that called? What's HIIT training? High intensity interval. If we're doing that and we're really getting on this topic in a short stretch, that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to understand people's systems. And if you are looking to be, our topic was about mental health and where we are this time of year, where we are as our dad details and our duty, our sense of service. Lots of great stuff came out of it. So I'm definitely not slamming the meat. I think it was 3 great conversations with a group of dudes that were open and available and seemingly willing to come back again to the table for another discussion. That always notwithstanding, I was still left wanting to know more about their systems. I didn't get quite enough. And I'll start from a position of selfishness. I want to know about your system so I can improve my system. And if that's what we're sharing, that's what I want to know. But yeah, this radical ownership of the season is fascinating. Remember back in the day when everyone used to do the one word?
They still do.
Oh God.
I saw it the other day and it triggered me. I was like, oh God. And again, to each their own. I'm not
Yeah.
doing the one word. I don't do, you know what? I might have 10 words. I
I
might have
got
no
lots.
words. I don't care. I'm going to do what I need to do when I need to do it. My one word right now is focus.
Mm.
That's gonna change the minute Monday morning comes. And
What
I'm
why
gonna
do you think that? Why do you think that? Why do you think it's gonna change?
because right now I have a lack of focus.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Gotcha.
like I'm zooming in on things in I'm zooming in on things so that I can keep some of my systems rolling. So
Mhm.
completely forget them for when school starts. But then when Monday comes, I'm going to be overwhelmed with things that require my focus and I can't give all my focus to it. So then it's a new word. And I don't know what word it's going to be. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Al- Along the same lines as you, and I've got so much to say, and I want to drop in some of Gary's comments here too. I I'm with you on the systems. The systems, you want magic, you want to learn to be a magician, build good systems. Like you said, you want to start running, you don't know where to begin, get your shoes and every day pick up your shoes, bring them to the door, whatever. Put them on and walk around in your house. What start building start building a process, something you're accountable to that you do often enough that you start to feel like you're moving in the right direction. This is my I love that. And there have been days and very few and I'll because the attraction to the activity becomes overwhelming for me. There have been days where I've gotten up and not felt like getting on the treadmill, but I've literally gotten out of bed and walked down to the basement and sat down in front of the shoes. And I told myself, just do that. It's time for you to get up now. Even if you don't go on the treadmill, you need to get up now. Get up, okay? Go to the shoes. By the time I get to the shoes, I'm a little bit more awake. I'm a little bit more motivated. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Put the shoes on. Next thing you know, I'm on the treadmill. An hour goes by and I feel like $1,000,000. And it just started with, oh God, just get to the shoes. And if that's all you do today, that's all you do today. It's a step in the right direction. So I love the systems. That's where, if you want to become a magician, learn how to deal with systems.
Mm, no. That's what I was disagreeing with.
And that's
Because
fine. You can
well,
disagree
okay,
with that.
but I think but here's where I would sort of kinda
What I'm
tweak.
gonna do is I'm gonna be flexible enough to listen to you to see what comes.
So, the I think the irony here about using the magician metaphor is that the magician knows they're not magical.
I know, but the outsiders, they wanna be magicians, Chris.
So we stop sitting in the audience, and in order to become because that's the only place that there's magic for the audience. Everyone else in the know recognizes that there are like you ask a magician how they do a trick, they'll never say it's magic. Well, they might if they think you're an audience member, they're going to tell you it's magic and they're going to sit there smiling. If they know that you are somebody that's also trying to understand the craft, then they're going to say it's sleight of hand. Here's what I when I had you looking at this hand, here's what I did with this hand. But I knew you were looking here. That's all I'm saying. And it's not a disagreement. I'm shaping your metaphor for me because I liked it because this is such a magical time of the year. I'm like, nope, it's a time of year. It's a time of year you're to stay on your systems, to stay getting up at the same time, to get back on the treadmill. You're already starting from nothing. You're actually starting from nothing. So any movement towards a good habit is a positive move. Even to sit in front of it. I would then just be cautious of measuring your boredom because to think that you're actually making progress puts you back in the audience again. You want to be back in the system. You make sure that when you are going down to the treadmill, at some point, at least turn the damn thing on. At least lace the shoes up. Like because progression is the is kind of like the partner of systems. They have to be taking you somewhere, right?
You don't right. You don't get to the machine unless you start with the shoes. And maybe for others it's different. And I love what you said about
For you, it was getting up. It was actually getting your ass out of
yeah.
bed because your bed is not the treadmill.
And I like what you said about taking kind of what I'm shaping and molding it so that it works for you. I totally get that. And I appreciate that. And that's why I remain flexible. At the end of the day, I like to use the word magic because other people live there.
Mhm.
They live there. Again, another one. They see you accomplish something and they're like, "What's the magic?" The magic is doing the work. They don't want to hear that because then the magic's gone. They're like, "There's no magic there." I'm like, "Exactly." But for me, sometimes I need to use their language to get them to buy in to whatever it is going on. Long story short, let me be frank.
I love the fossil. And for Gary, I don't know if you know about our fossil fuel list. It's from a back in the day. Was it full of shit sayings, idioms, and language? Just these sayings that need to officially remain fossil fuel. Go back and bury them.
Let me lie to you here for a second.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
I
go out. I'm gonna lie to you and
I
tell you,
appreciate this little conversation. I thank
I,
you for being honest with me about lying.
no problem. I'm not gonna get to the lie yet. I want to
Okay.
go back to what you were saying about decode the book club for men. Don't worry, Gary. No, let me go to Gary first.
Okay.
Okay, Gary was saying that he relishes the opportunity to reflect while not being in the trenches. We align there, Gary. I enjoy that too because when I'm back in the trenches, I really need to focus on the things in front of me at the time. Gary also says that it provides, as I said, the opportunity to go deeper and consider things from other perspectives. One of the reasons why I love these long breaks is because I can dive into those spaces that I normally don't. I mean, I do, just not at the same extent, I think. So, book club for men. So, Chris and I, a zillion years ago, we started book club for men where we're actually reading books, meeting online, and talking about them and our place with that in that. Long story short, Chris messages me about something, says he wishes he could bring it to the book club for men to play with the idea. So I'm like, let's do it. So we set up 3 dates that we would meet with the book club for men. It was actually 2 dates and then a bonus. This is where I'm going to lie to you. At at the last get together, you had challenged us to go a little bit deeper and talk about the dark spaces, our dark spaces. I'm not going to shape it too much. I'm going to lie to you now and tell you that it's really easy for me to be able to talk about my dark spaces to anybody, anywhere. That's not the case. In the book club for men, I was able to play with some of that and express some of that. And what I came to understand more about me is that I don't think I can talk about my dark spaces, but it's got to be with the people that I want to talk to about my dark spaces. And I don't need to get to a place where I can openly talk about the in between to anybody. That's to me, that is pure BS because I like to have trust with some people around me. I like to build trusting relationships where I can then discuss these things. The book club for men has turned out to be a great place where it seems to me like the same individuals have come back to the table to talk about whatever topic and to be vulnerable. Some of the guys don't share, but they're still, for me, they're part of the circle. I don't have a problem with them sitting at the table when I'm sharing because I believe that one day, if they feel like they can share, they will. And I've had this experience where I've connected with some of the guys outside of the big group and they've shared stuff. We've discussed certain things. So fast forward to right now. Gary's here with us right now. After our last meeting, I chatted with Gary a little bit. I shared some things with Gary that are pretty risky, could be viewed as risky work, political type stuff. Gary could very well become my vice principal at any moment in time because he's in a position to be promoted. And we don't have a million high schools here in my district. Chances are, if I'm at this school long enough, Gary could be my vice principal. Gary could very well be my principal someday. I don't care because Gary is one of the book club for men people who I'm okay to be vulnerable with. And if Gary were to take my trust and vulnerability and twist it on me, I would say, shame on you, Gary. And I would say, you know, who, what would people think if they knew that Gary was once part of a trusted group and then exposed a member of the group? Like, really? Then you're just a loser. And I gained from that because I grew from that person being in that trusted group. So yeah, I wanted to lie to you today. I've been waiting to use that line. Let me lie to you right now and tell you something because my youngest says to me all the time, "Let me be honest. I'm gonna be honest." I'm like, "So you walk around lying all day?" And he gives me this look. I'm like, "Get that fossil saying out of your vocabulary. Let me be honest with you here." I I don't like it, so I'm gonna start using let me lie to you here for a second, and I'm gonna have some fun with that. Gary's made a comment here. Um, Gary's talking about agreeing about assessing modifying systems, the importance of that long-term change. But he wonders if thinking systems can sometimes be a barrier to change for some because it carries a weighty connotation. And he also says, Gary, I've had the same thought. Um, you wonder if there are any other starting points. For me, systems are what get me moving in a direction that I want to be in. I do believe it's important to be flexible enough to work with your systems because you could build a system that, although it's getting you somewhere and it's working, it could become inefficient or ineffective depending on your goals, um, your thinking. I think you need to I think you need to be flexible enough to adapt to continue to become effective and improve, but you still have to be disciplined enough to build a system, or else you're never going to have a process that gets you anywhere. And as educators, the three of us, I would agree, see that all the time. We got kids in front of us who refuse to establish systems for one reason or another. Then you got other kids who build a system, but then are so religious about it that they can't see that it's not working anymore. It worked for what you needed it for originally. Now you need to evolve. You need to shift. A good example, I would say, and Chris, I'm going to use you as the example, is someone who's learned to run and then learned to run a certain a certain distance at a certain time. You have your system that gets you into the running, but then as you're running and you're trying to improve, you're trying to get faster or you're trying to become more efficient, there are shifts in how you operate within that system in order to get you to where you need to be. So I'm a great example. You're a great example of someone who's had to shift your system along the way to get to where you want to be. I've been on the treadmill doing my thing and sometimes thinking, "Uh-oh, this is way too comfortable for me now. In order for me to grow, in order for me to improve my cardiovascular fitness or whatever, this is the next thing I need to do. Am I willing to do that now?" Because my willingness to do that has to translate into action, which means I got to build it into a process so that it doesn't burn me out, so I can do it at maybe small increments that work for me to get me to where I want to be. If I'm inflexible and I'm like, no, I have a system. I wake up every morning at this time, I get on at this time, I get off at this time. After a while, there's probably going to be no growth. It's still good for me to do the exercise. The system's still benefiting me, but am I growing? Do I want to grow? These are all questions that pop up somewhere along the way for me. Am I flexible enough to grow? Like right now, I'll tell you, at work, I gotta tell, I am tired of the growth I'm experiencing, if that makes any sense. I'm so tired from learning something new every day and shifting all the time. I'm just tired. I would like some time that I can just sit with my growth and kind of foster it before I bump up again. I don't have that luxury, but I feel like I'm fatigued from the growth because I'm not getting any time to work with what I got. I'm constantly being hit over the head with something new. And instead of being like, I can't do that, I'm not going to do that, I'm like, okay, how do I take this and incorporate it so I can continue to do my job? That's what I discovered over this last week. I am tired of growth right now. I'm growing too fast. I'm growing at somebody else's pace. I have no say in my growth. I'm growing, I'm learning every day. But I got to tell you, man, I'm feeling the fatigue of that.
Um, the So can you put Gary's quote back up? I wanted just the connotation quote again. Weighty connotation. I'd like to know a little bit more about the weighty connotation. So I find that vague. So I want to understand that just a little bit. I agree about assessing and modifying systems is important for long-term change, but I wonder if thinking systems can sometimes be a barrier to change for some because it carries away the conversation. So are we just talking about the admittance that how we think and how we do, there isn't an alignment there. I like so where I go with what Gary said and what I say about you sort of recognizing your fatigue, your growth fatigue. Um, it makes me think about embodying our philosophy, like and you had rest in a biological sense is when your body heals. I was just talking to my kid about this the other day, talking about the necessity for him getting his 10 hours. He says it feels like that's a lot of sleep. I'm like, biologically speaking, this is what your body actually needs right now because of its rapid development, because of the energy that's being exerted. Your body needs to take that time to heal, recalibrate, put stuff back on the shelves, calm, cortisol levels to come down. Like all that kind of stuff happens while you sleep, believe it or not. It's nothing that happens in active state. It's actually when you're in a passive state and your body can then become active independent from your brain, disconnects. We go into that deep REM sleep. We know that there's paralysis that happens there. Maybe you didn't know, but paralysis happens when you're in deep REM sleep. When you're in paralysis, your body basically says, thank you. We can unplug. Now we can go to work on the back end. It doesn't happen simultaneously. So I'm fundamentally aware that rest begets restoration and replenishment. I get that. So that's my first statement. If rest is what is necessary, my hope for you is that you're present enough in your own mind to know how much rest you need and what type of rest you need, right? Because we talk about the two different types of time. So you have the chronos, which is like the minutes, and then you have the kairos, which is the quality. So whatever I think it's called kairotic time you need to get the kind of rest you need to be able to feel like you can embody your philosophy and how you want to grow. That's critically important. Underpinning all this, though, is that that's what progress is. It is growth. It is development. It is developing yourself both internally and externally. And if you're feeling the weight of that development constantly, then for sure, take the time you need, scale it back, find what's kind of like a reasonable and proportional kind of an approach for it. I would say, because I've been along for the ride, that I have access to information about your current growth state that others may not. So I get it, where I would say you have both professionally and personally gone through expansive growth by necessity. So then I bring it back to, what's the growth you want to have? Is there an intrinsic version of this that would feel different than constantly being like that kind of like external loci that you're constantly being wagged by, the new things that the job's asking you to do, family stuff going on? Do you feel like there's openness to that internalized kind of growth? Can you find the time for it? And is there value there? Or does it sort of come down to, nope, I'm just too tired, I can't do anything right now? And I've met people like that. They actually do need to have, in a waking state, they need to unplug. And I hear people say this. It's similar to that idea of making it to the Friday, thank God it's the weekend. But I don't know if it has anything to do with the 2 days of the weekend. It has more to do with the 5 days that led up to the weekend. So instead of saying, thank God it's Friday, or thank God it's the weekend, I always hear in my head, thank God it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. Thank God it's not the other 5 days. So these are the little thoughts that are kind of cracking off here. I think that ultimately, if the philosophy that you're embodying, and I know that's vague, because philosophy is not only what you do, it's how you think, it's how you connect. It's the food that's coming in, it's the shit that goes out, it's the shit that doesn't make it in, it's the food that you choose not to have. Like, there's so much to a philosophy, whatever your philosophy is to embody. As long as you can maintain a connection to a community that you value and values you, then you get to take all the time you want. I would argue that if you do not have a community that you value or values you, then don't stop working. Don't take any downtime. One of the things I've kind of accepted, I guess wholeheartedly, is that no matter how much I don't necessarily like being in big crowds, sometimes in those crowds I have to try and find the people that are important to me, because they're not going to come and knock on my door, right? Like, Amazon's not delivering those relationships, not in a way that I want them to. And, if I draw in what Gary has said about the connotation or the having to changing our thinking systems, I do believe that if you remain connected with a community, you inevitably will change your thinking systems. I will say there's no space in my world for me to be the mountain on the man on the mountain, or the dude in the cave that's waiting for interesting people to come and talk to me. I don't have any sort of hope that I'm going to be able to just stoically maintain. And this is like stoic in almost the wrong use of the word, like this idea of like self-control and the discipline and detached and not having any connection, which is not what stoicism is. But if I use that version for a second, I don't get to be the man on the mountain where the community is going to come to me and look for me. So I have to change how I think. I can choose my speed. But if I were to use an example, even from my on-ramp, that's exactly where I landed with thinking about my mom, and starting from the point of view that I can place controls on this. And I start to realize my need to maintain this thinking system is actually making other people happy, which is the antithesis of building community. And the most important community to me is the other 3 people that are living in my house. So I got to change. Now, if we make this solely about work, well, I think a similar approach works. Maybe it's a little bit slower. Maybe it's a little less intimate. But recognizing that there are things about our jobs that definitely, by choosing every day to be there, then I would say we are choosing to let our thinking change. I don't have as clear a sense of cost on that, I think, as you do. I think you have right now a far clearer kind of attachment to the cost of that change. I'm not currently in a life cycle where I'm tracking that. I don't feel like there's a cost. I feel like I'm kind of in balance. There's a transactional nature to the balance. I do a thing, I get a thing. I do a thing, I get a thing. It's not I do a thing, 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 I get a thing. I'm a little bit more balance.
Um, I like that. I want to circle back to Gary,
Mm-hmm.
where he said he wonders if there are other starting points. And I think that's a great place for experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
Why not try to start at another point? And does it have to be a point that somebody designates, or can you just designate it yourself? I think there's some beauty, there's some art that goes with the science and trying something new and different. Gary also says that he thinks that our work with students, some students, we sometimes ask students to try something short term before talking systems. We realize talking systems too early may not help move things. Um, I agree with that. I think that many of the students I work with would just fall off their chair if I started talking to them based on some of the things that we've discussed here today. It would just be way too much for them. Um, and for others, I'm finding that it's a minority that's craving what we're talking about today. And I feel like the majority, as Gary was saying, you talk short term, and sometimes I've found you don't even give it a name. Before Christmas break, there was a student I was working with that showed great success over that week. And all it was, hey, when you get here tomorrow, come on into room 208. We'll get started on something. And that was, you'd think I was harming the child the way they were reacting to that. Like, oh, but. I'm like, when you get here, just come to room 208 and we'll do a little bit of work. That's all it was. If I had said to them, we need to build a system, and you start going, they would have been like, yeah, I'm never coming back here again. It was the simplest I could make it, and they were pushing back on that simplicity quite hard. And I just reiterated, when you get here, come back here. We'll do a little bit of work. I just repeated myself like a moron. But guess what? Guess what? Over those 5 days, a system was created, whether they see it or not. They operated a certain way, and it led, at least from my perspective, from my view, it led to something tangible being accomplished by the end of the time spent in the room with me supervising. And they liked it. They found satisfaction, even though they would pretend that they did not. There was satisfaction because I would see them submit their work and a look of relief on their face that one of 500 assignments was complete. And I'm like, just come back tomorrow. And then, as I think I told you, every day I would bump it up a notch. So by the end, they'd be in the room wearing their full uniform, not telling me to go F myself, and doing some work. I, it wasn't magic. It was, this is what I need from you to move in a proper direction, or in a direction I deem as proper. Do it or don't do it. A lot of kids don't show up the next day. They just don't. So nothing happens. This one did. And by the end of the week, there was, in my opinion, huge growth. And and people can disagree, and that's okay. But I was the person in the room with them. I was the one doing the heavy lifting with them until they could lift themselves. They could do the heavy lifting on their own. But they needed a spotter. I needed somebody to set some expectations because they certainly weren't going to.
Um, I've started to talk to the kids. You're right. Introducing systems theory. That's how you and I and others can talk technically. I think adults can kind of handle that. My kids meal version of that is talking about consequences and separating out
Your chicken
this,
tenders meal.
your chicken tenders meal. You know that story, right? The separate so systems can suggest a real sort of, there can be a complexity to it, inaccessibility to it, unless you're really lit up about it. I'm such a behavioralist that I love watching people, and I'll sort of say, what was sort of surprising And I will say surprising according to my own theories, but then maybe also surprising because I know how this person operates and they made a different choice than what they would normally make. Like, I love those moments. So I've started to talk to my own students about consequences and the responsibility that we have towards consequences. We can call them outcomes as we want as well, but consequences is important because consequences comes directly from a social work framework of antecedent behavior consequence, antecedent behavior consequence. And so you have this tracking system for working with students, which typically is used towards, like you have an adverse or atypical behavior. You want to start data tracking it to try and kind of understand what it looks like in the wild. You start gathering the data. So, you have the behavior that happens. And then right away you say, well, what was the thing that happened just before that? So you have the antecedent. And then you have the consequence. What's the outcome of that behavior? The outcome of that behavior, depending on context, can change. So, for example, if a student has, we're starting to track sleepiness in class. So, context within the classroom, the consequence would be different, or the list of consequences would be different than if the kid is sleepy at home. So, we already know that depending on context, we can create sometimes some artificiality in the data, as in it's not the true measure of what this is like in life. So we have to be cautious to say that just because it happens here, that it's actually going to have these gross impacts all over the place. So this is just kind of like some of the fundamentals of me looking at systems that are already built into my brain when I observe it. But I've started to talk to the students about consequences and making sure that they understand that consequences are just neutral outcomes until you judge them to be something else. So this is where the stoicism comes in. They are just outcomes. They are just responses. They are not good. They are not bad. It is just the thing that happens. And there are good things that happen once we judge them to be, and there are bad things that happen. You could even say that something that's perceived to be good ultimately is bad. Something that's bad ultimately can be good. For example, your baby cries. You respond by giving them a bottle because you think that they are hungry. So that's the consequence of the crying. You feed them. An outcome of that could be that the baby shits themselves because they actually weren't hungry. They weren't hungry. They just wanted to be held. So there's the data sets sometimes are massive, and there's a certain working around in the dark to try and figure these things out. But I'd like to talk to the kids about consequences, because if we talk about consequences, then I feel like I have an access point with the students to understand how the thing that they do creates results. Even small things. You don't do your work, the work doesn't get done. That then becomes the antecedent to something else, and you can start to chain these behaviors, and then you get a really clear look at systems. I first started to play with this just a little bit. Gary might be able to appreciate this. You would appreciate this as well. So back when I was doing the Access program, and I did this in Alt Ed as well, but it was more powerful in Access because of how dislocated I was. We were a off-site place that the kids had to be taxied to. Very few of them actually lived in the neighborhood because my board only had 4 sites. So the kids could be coming from any collection of high schools that were in the north, in the east, in the west, or central. So kid arrives, and it wouldn't always be in the intake. Sometimes this question would pop up during the intake. Sometimes it would be once we got beyond the intake, I would just ask the kid. And once I got to know them, I'd say, at what point, so thinking back on your academic career or your life in school, at what point do you think, was it pretty well assured that you were going to meet someone like me in this Access program? So in this program, I did this in Alt Ed as well. So when did you kind of notice that, or when did something happen that you could go back to and say, yep, you know what? This is where you popped up on my radar because of a thing that I did, or because of a thing that I said, or because of a behavior that I showed somebody, because of an activity that I did, because I got in that fight, because I left home, because I stopped talking to my dad, because I started disrespecting a teacher, because I fell in love. And we get a really interesting kind of like time travel going on And then we could say, okay, so you threw your desk, you in math class, you threw the desk across the room. So that's the behavior. What was the consequence? And then they talk about what happened after that. Okay. So if that consequence then is the end, so what was, and then you can kind of chain together that consequence to as an antecedent to another behavior. And all of a sudden the kid kind of goes, holy shit. And I had one kid say, one kid said one time, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And how it seems like I always see the same people in the suspension programs. I'm like, what does that mean to you? It's like, well, it's like, all my friends are always suspended. I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? I don't know. And so, and again, I'm not going to give it away for free, but I thought that was a pretty big aha moment for a kid noticing, just like out of the periphery of their perspective, hey, something's going on here. Like, why are all my friends? Because I think the statement actually started from, yeah, yo, all my friends are in access. And then it kind of shifted to, yeah, yo, all my friends are in access. You're like, okay, you're settling into some understanding about your thinking system here. Maybe that's maybe that's the heavy connotation that Gary was referring to. Maybe it's something that you have to sort of notice on your own, which I would fundamentally agree with, right? I've noticed that other students, when we sort of tell them that they're at this kind of precipice of their own, kind of falling off the edge. Well, I think only the individual can sort of rate that. I always felt like in the that program that I was doing with suspension and expulsion is that many of the students, by many rating systems, had completely hit rock bottom. And they show up with me and they're like, they got their lunch, they got their weed, they got their tunes, they're sort of rolling in and they just, they'll sit and just kind of chill and like, I don't know. I don't know if they're at their personal rock bottom, but they might have hit the sort of like they hit the consequence chain from their other high school. I'll go back just to my kind of summary on this is just I get it. Systems, when we talk about systems language, that can be pretty inaccessible. But I do feel if you start to kind of just bring it down to some of the consequences and center the kid in their choices as much as possible. And some kids will say, well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. I get that too. Well, let's work on that. Let's talk about that for a little bit longer. Let's talk about how moving forward you have a choice. Let's talk about the choice you did make because you actually took a third space. You didn't, you actually, you weren't being given what you wanted. So you created an alternate universe for yourself. Well, I guess I'm part of that alternate universe now because now you're working with me. So welcome to my universe. So I like consequences I would talk about. And I talk about them all the time. And I find it really useful for the kids to also recognize that consequences aren't negative by nature, but we kind of branded them that way. You're going to have to face the consequences. Are you prepared to face the consequences of this? Right? We heavy handed and always, for the most part, connotate that it's going to be a negative thing, that something bad will happen if you don't follow my lead, if you don't follow my system.
I think it would be great for us to start to work on how do we change the connotation for the word consequence and use it more often and not only for the negative what might be perceived as a negative aspect rather than a positive one.
I think that comes with just active usage,
I agree.
right? So be that
Yeah.
person in the room that says stuff like that. Be the person in the room that says the word system, and
Hmm.
then starts to sort of navigate your definition for other people. Shine the light on the spots that are important for this particular moment. Don't let other people actually define it or compartmentalize it or silo it. And then you'll have some people around the table that are like, yeah, yeah, I do that. So they're just revisiting their own kind of antecedents, right? Because if their behavior is that they've misaligned the word or never learned another path for the word, then you're rewriting their code. And believe me, I've sat enough of those tables where I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to the alt ed head over there. I'm gonna ask if I can use their such and such. I'm like, well, that's an alt ed resource. I'm like, is it? Is it? And then you can see the people like rewriting their code. They're like, yeah, I guess we never really were told that we couldn't ask for that or we couldn't do that. Like, there we go.
Rochelle says she's been trying to catch some of their grade 6 students with what you were talking about.
So the idea of talking about consequences or talking about systems.
I
So,
think it's consequences, but let's see if Rochelle jumps in and
mhm,
says anything about that. Leave it to Rochelle to push the limits at work.
mhm. Yeah, and so it was also in air quotes. So all this, my assumption when I see air quotes is that we're doing kind of dual meaning on this. That I I I think Rochelle's version of rewriting the code, right? Shining the light on what's important about this. So catch, we can say it's catch is in the negative connotation of you've done something wrong, or we're talking about the glimmers, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about, the glimmers of things, the green flags, the positive things. Find the kids doing these things as well. Absolutely, because with the consequences, I also am a big proponent for my students of creating agency. As soon as they tell me they have no choice, they have no whatever, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You rolled in here, and you stepped in the door and you were like, hello, everybody. I'm like, and then I knocked you down for it because you entered the room too loudly. You disrupted. You made a personal choice that impacted the public environment. We were in here working. We were kind of enjoying ourselves, and we were sort of in a vibe. And you came in with a different vibe. You made that choice. You actively did that. Oh, well, I was only joking. I'm like, nope, another choice. Again, you have choice. So I like to bring the consequence, and that's a real sort of simple one. But what about the students that are sort of like our lifelong disempowerment learners? They've sort of like I can't do this. I can't write a sentence. I can't do a thing. So you can sort of again retrofit agency once the kids understand consequence. When they can actually see the chain of consequence, the ABC, antecedent behavior consequence, when they start to see that they actually are making decisions and those decisions lead to outcomes or consequences, then they can replicate it. Or at least we can say, well, it only happened because I was here at school. Okay, let's talk about context. My parents would never let me do that. Okay, there's a discuss. So there's the scarcity. So there's the space that we need to sort of build a system into so that you can replicate it. If it works for you, it embodies your philosophy and it doesn't harm the community. Hey, let's firm that up. And it doesn't matter if you're in grade 6 or in grade 3. I think we can find versions to help kids understand this. I think when they're not given the chance to both understand how they have impact on the world optimally and that they do actually have impact on the world negatively, and for them to see that they are drivers of that moment, I'm sure any kid, and you'll see when it happens in the wild, when they cozy up to someone and they start priming you back in April about the video game systems that their friends have and how much they love playing them and they love hanging out with that thing. And then their birthday rolls around in October and they're like, so do you think I can get that video game system? They understand agency. They've been working you since back in April to sort of make that change. They've just played the long game. So helping the kids kind of backtrack that. I love doing that.
We have some comments. So
Do it.
Gary's reflecting on some good memories of teaching behaviorism in his social science classes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I also wanted to say, I like what you said, the word consequence. You can also use the word outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I like, though, the idea of using the word consequence because most people that I know attach a negative connotation to it. But we experience consequences all the time. And then they, we tend to judge consequences in a negative way. I guess that's just the way society likes to have built that. But we can, if we're going to impose some type of judgment, we can also get people to start thinking about consequences as just outcomes. You do this, what is the consequence? Good, bad, however you'd like to judge it, if you even wish to judge it. Um, I like that.
The intention with the ABC chart is to actually eschew any positive or negative. It's just to track. So the starting point with this particular tracking device is to make sure, and we've talked about this, the importance of data tracking. When you data track, you want to remove so much qualitative and effective language out of it just to be able to have observable data, and that you're not putting connotation on it. So I'm starting from a point here when we talk about consequence, that is a neutral data point. It's a neutral pickup point. I also feel like saying consequence, I have access to the word sequence. and kids will understand a sequence of events. So I'll say, okay, a sequence of events within there, you're gonna have consequences. It's in the next thing that happens, the next thing that happens. Sequence is the full set, consequence is the individual things in between. So I feel like I have better access points to talk to the kids. If I say outcome, I find most students don't have access to that word outcome as part of a chain. And I think it's just the simplicity and elegance of the word of sequence, consequence, sequence, consequence. And when I talk about sequence with the kids, sometimes I'll talk about flow because I can say if you can stay in a beneficial or a growth sequence, those consequences are constantly clack, 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 clack. It's just happening. I feel outcome is a bit of a stopper word, at least in my space. Having one-on-one conversation with students whose behaviors have made a radical change. Yeah, I'll assume that's what means the catching. Back to the catching.
The one-on-ones are huge
They are.
when particularly when the one-on-ones are, I find in my line of work, are huge. Build, 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 and then you know how many times this year I've said to kids, I've just gone right for the relationship. I've said, look, we've worked together. Things have been good. I'm not sure what's going on today or what happened yesterday, but you're totally disrespecting me here. I don't appreciate this. So what do we do moving forward? And they look at you like they're shocked that you'd go there. I'm like, no, we're going there because I've been building for weeks, you know, and it's one kid called me out for being way too technical. One kid, so the only reason you talk to me is because you know, you just talk to me so that I think that we're friendly. I'm like, no, I am friendly. I am friendly. When I ask you how you're doing, I actually want to know. When I say to you, what are you looking forward to after school today? I actually want to know. I'm not doing it. It's not a game. It's not a game. And if you feel that way, I apologize. What can I do to continue to demonstrate to you that this is authentic? This is not, I'm not playing a game. I'm telling you though, I've said to kids too, if I didn't care, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. I just tell you to get out. Go away. I don't want you around me anymore. But I don't do that. I talk. I say, "Hey, what's going on here? What's with the disrespect?" Or what I'm perceiving to be disrespectful. Because sometimes they'll say, and I honestly believe them, they'll say, "I didn't know I was being disrespectful." I'm like, "Okay, well, guess what? Now you're talking to an adult, and I'm telling you that that behavior to me is disrespectful, and this is why." So if you care at all about the authenticity of this work relationship, I need you to shift. And I'm happy to shift too. There have been times where kids have said to me, "We don't like what you're doing." I'm like, "Fair enough." So then I look at, and I say this out loud. I break this down with them. Let's look at the context. Where are we? We're at school. What's my role here in this building right now? This is my role. So you getting all hot and bothered that I'm trying to get you to do some work around this assignment, and you feel I'm being disrespectful, you got to look at the context. If I see you on the street on Saturday at the shawarma shop and I start hammering you about your history, that's offside. But here, it's not offside. If I see you at the shawarma shop, hopefully I'm going to be like, what do you get on your shawarma? I want to know. Like, this is what we're going to talk about. Just like with the kid that I could have nailed in the cafeteria, but chose not to because my logic was it's lunchtime and you're eating and I'm on supervision. So I decided I wasn't gonna bring in, you told me you were gonna be in room 208 at whatever time you weren't there. No. I decided not to hammer them with that. I decided to roll with the context. Kid's eating lunch, hanging out with his friends. He looks up, he sees me, and his heart stops. I'm like, keep eating, bro. Keep Let the heart keep beating. I'm not gonna bother you about this other stuff because we're in the cafeteria. I'm on supervision. You're eating and having fun with your friends. I will ruin your day later, not now. That's just what I decided to do. And it worked because now this kid talks to me a lot more than he did before. When he sees me in the cafeteria, he knows chances are I'm not going to hammer him with other things. I'll ask him about what he's eating, whether it's good or not, blah, blah, blah. That's just me. Other people will disagree. The good thing about me right now is I've gained some confidence, some life experiences that I'm flexing my way because they work for me. And if you don't like it, then you don't like it. Hopefully, you're lucky and I flex a little bit of flexibility so I can take in some of what you're saying and maybe play with it. Maybe not. I don't know. Um, we're ready to shut down for today, Chris.
I got to go check that damn turkey.
I hope you enjoy your turkey with your guests and Foodapalooza tomorrow, Waterloo region.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, I hope your mouth is watering. Um, Chris gave me the playlist. I put it together in an order that might work and might not work.
Yeah, and I'm still flexy. I don't have. There's some stuff on there that's just kind of things of interest, right? If there's something else you're sort of seeing in it, you're like, well, because I know you said that one noodle shop, it's not open,
Right.
and it's always more aspirational than actual, because depending on travel time,
Gary's
right?
mouth is watering.
Yeah, depending on travel time, depending on, the weather, and we end up still let conversation kind of guide our motion, right? So part of it is the community, it's the ability to kind of break bread and just connect. Um, Conversation takes us a little bit longer, then we sit a little bit longer, right? That's just how it kind of rolls. It's not hard and fast. I know you'd asked. I think I'm gonna aim, if it works, to be there around 4. Does that work ish? So
Yeah,
that'll
that
be my
works.
aim. Yeah, I'll message you along the way what my travel time is like. It's always like getting through the first hard part is getting through the Toronto stretch.
Mm,
And then sometimes the second hard part, believe it or not, I don't know why it's like this. It's around Highway 6. There just seemed to be something going on in that neighborhood creeping up to Guelph, that there's work being done just west of Milton. So
I gotcha. And that's
that's
great. 4 o'clock is good. I'm available, which is always important
yeah, of
since you
course.
usually park here and we go from here. So that's good.
Yep.
Um, Gary says he's looking forward to taking it all in, and I would say that's a great starting point. Just
Hmm.
take it in, and it, I don't know if it's you and I are in the element. We're with people we like. We're
Hmm.
chilling. We eat. We talk. We move. Sometimes we move fast. Sometimes we move slow. Usually slower than faster, but we just make of it what it is.
Exactly. So it will be a good time, because that's just how that works out. Plus, like, food and conversation and just chilling time, like, it's a good way to kind of connect with community, as we say.
Yeah. Awesome, bro. Well, I'll let you get to that turkey. Hope it's all good. This was season 8, episode 12, number 319 of the Decoded podcast. And hopefully the next time we meet will be in the new year. Peace
It
to
will be.
2024. See
Ciao,
ya.
man.